right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Enough to Keep Going podcast. This is episode 348 for the week of July 28th. We are rounding the corner of July, heading into August, which probably means we've got some sports games to talk about. Last week, we talked about EA College Football 25, but guess what? We're probably going to be talking about that as well. We got a beta of Marvel Rivals that opened up this weekend or this week, along with anything else we've been playing over the course of the week and this week's news. I'm your host, DBQ Hams, for this week, and joining me, as always, GameLogIQ running the boards. How are you, sir?
I'm good, DBQ. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. Glad to be here. Glad to talk about some games. So why don't you stay on the mic? Because last week I talked a little bit about EA College Football, and we had some good conversation in the chat with those joining us, and it looks like you've picked it up as well. So I was playing it on Xbox. I've still played a little bit of it. Started a dynasty with a team, started working through some of the recruitment pieces. I want to know why you picked it up on PS5 and how's your time been with it? Also want to make sure your mic works. Yeah.
So, let's see. So yeah, I picked it up on PS5 because by most reports I had seen, the game supposedly plays a little better on PlayStation 5 than on Xbox. I mean, that's probably, neither here nor there, and, minor shades of gray in between. So I think I'm sorry, what was you were, and then you were asking, why did I pick it up? Just continuing through, keeping tabs on new releases throughout the year. This was one that last week was a little weird in that there were, like we talked about last week, there were several things that came out, right? Flintlock.
Yeah, Flintlock.
Kinutsugami. There's one other one that we talked about last week that I'm brain dropping sync on, but there were like 3 games that came out last week.
Oh, and the Nintendo World Championship. Dungeons of Hinterberg.
Yes, Dungeons of Hinterberg. Yep. So I got into 2 out of those 3 last week. I bought Kinutsugami, but haven't had a chance to start it yet. And so this one was one that I kind of had on the list, but I kind of put it off into like the week after. And so because it came out on Friday, and I figured I would have time to get around to it. And so here we are, in the preceding, in the week just gone by, and I did have enough time to get into it, so I picked it up. Quite a bit into the game week. So I think the overall tale of the tape on this for me, and I'm actually really, as I've been thinking through it today, prepping for the podcast, I'm actually really glad that kind of you went first, and I had an opportunity to kind of pick your brain and ask some questions about it. I'm trying to figure out the polite way to say this.
No, just launch it out.
I think the tale of the tape for this is it's nice that it's back, but for me personally, it's not like the Return of the King. And maybe as I've been kind of thinking about it and revisiting it, I said in the lead up to this, even as happy as I am, that we're getting Madden NFL back, what I would really like is Madden NFL. While it's nice that we're getting NCAA, college football. What I would really like is college basketball. And I think part of my reality is that this game was much less of a surrogate for Madden for me than basketball was a surrogate for any of the NBA games, because a college hoop season is what, like high 20s, maybe low 30s in terms of numbers of games in a season.
Drastically reduced from the 80 some games.
Right. So, I've talked about how it's a struggle, right, to get through games with those longer seasons, hockey and baseball and NCAA basketball. It turns out I think I realized, filled a spot for me of allowing me to get through,
Sure.
So, there's several drum beats for this on this for me that are kind of lows or kind of detract from where the game could have struck really big for me. I think one of my major things here is, I don't know what it is, but like flipping through the menus is not as smooth as it normally is. I feel like in Madden, like it's the audio feedback isn't as poppy like as it used to be. It's with really that clear, very clear and audible like kind of sound, as you're
Sure,
flipping
as you're
through the
moving
menu.
between. Yep.
It's
When was
it's
just for comparison? When was the last Madden that you sunk significant time into?
it's been a while. I mean, I've not been really. I mean, the height of my Madden years was like the early 2000s. That's when I would sit and play through like multiple seasons, probably like 2004, 2005.
Have
And
you
it's
played the last couple of Maddens?
not other than like maybe a toe dip, on
Okay.
Game Pass.
I only ask because the menus in the last two seasons of Madden have been kind of laggy as well.
Yeah, and so that's big for me just because I use such a wide variety of the plays in the menu. And then I'll comment on that too. I don't know whether it's because it's college football or because so here I'm playing the Louisville Cardinals is where my dynasty is, but I am playing with the Michigan Pro set offense, and then I run a 3-3-5 defense. And it feels like the sheer number of plays are like they feel tangibly limited. And I don't know if that's because it's trying to simulate, college football, because, obviously they wouldn't have probably as wide an array of plays. It's in some ways, but in some ways, maybe there should be more, because college football teams do lots of weird wackadoodle stuff that you never do in the pros. So, but in particular, that menu lagginess, it definitely comes through tangibly for me. It was super interesting that we got a chance to talk through, and I got a chance to ask you some questions about the scouting game, because as much as I talked about how like I felt like kind of overwhelmed by current scouting games and current sports games, I went into this, and yay verily, I spent an hour to an hour and a half of the first game just going through the scouting menu, and it's kind of a mini game. And
there's a lot there. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's some points where kind of it dries up and it feels very repetitive to me, but then there are other times where it's kind of like playing poker, like you do all these things, you don't know that the guy's going to respond, how the person's going to respond, and you feel good, when when you lock somebody in. So, and I'm still in the early goings of that. In the first, couple of weeks, because I had the way the Cardinal schedule was set up, it was like I think we had a bye week, and then we had a game, and then I think we had a bye week and another game, and then I think we have another bye week like later on. So, even though I've only played 2 games, I've had like 4 or 5 weeks in the season, and so I've actually had some time for the recruiting game to kind of matriculate a little bit, and so at first I only recruited like the like 6 players, like my first 6 prospects, to fill up kind of that stack in the recruiting menu screen, and now I'm looping through, starting to recruit for the positions that I'm gonna have shortfalls in when the seniors graduate. So, but I mean, I will say that part of the game, the recruiting game, I actually kind of really like. We'll see how it goes on and just how repetitive it gets, but I do find that aspect of it interesting.
In the recruiting game, are you like when I did it and targeted different people? I was really targeting people that I was probably in their top 3, 4, in order to try to make right. The way that this works is you see the top 5 schools that they're interested in. You see a bar that shows you kind of degree of interest, and only playing, only getting through a quarter of a season yet. I'm not sure how much that bar shifts. So I wasn't really going to go after somebody super low on the bar because I didn't know how much play I actually had to go with. So what's been your approach in terms of who you're targeting and how you're choosing those players?
So there are in the right corner of that menu, there's about 10 filters. There's 9, and then there's all of the states, and so I just count all of the states as a singular filter. So I go through all of them, not equally and not as frequently, but I do recruit across the spectrum because I do want to lock in some players that I am very likely to land that are maybe only 3-star players, and limit my exposure of constantly just going after 5-star players and 4-star players. Because of course you basically have time as a budget, and you expend it per player, and then you have an overall bucket. And so at some point, I'm like, okay, there's got to be an economic piece to this, and at some point, it's going to become impinging. So that's how. So one of the first players that I'm really kind of landing, and I've got scheduled for a visit the weekend that we play Pitt, is a 3-star player. And then I'm also again playing the gambling odds, because you never know when like a 2-star or a 3-star player is going to really develop right in the latter half of their college career. So
right, and you see a little bit where you get the green diamond or the red diamond is kind of a bust or a boon.
Yep. So I'm playing things that way, I'm looking at doing things like recruiting regionally, like and locally. So, the quarterback. So, 2 of my 5 quarterbacks are seniors. One of them is my starter. They're going to graduate, obviously. So the first quarterback I'm going after is a kid from Kentucky, right? So, keep it regional. We'll see how that works out. So, So that part of it I think is good. So laggy menus, limited plays, set of plays, and again I'm not sure exactly what's driving that. On that recruiting thing, I listened to Kind of Funny Games Daily, and I heard how one of the co-hosts, Mike, was mentioning how some of the music in those menus is really repetitive, and I think my takeaway dovetails a lot with his, where this game is lacking in a little bit of pageantry is part of the problem with it. And in order to raise the floor of it,
there's lots of drum lines. Yes.
As a college football game, and convey that feeling, because that's what it really trades on, right? For its popularity, is it needs that pageantry. Mm-hmm. And so like you're in the menu for an hour and a half doing recruiting, and it's just a drum corps line. And at points as I'm listening to it, I'm like, oh boy, this is really repetitive. But then as I started really critiquing the game, I was like, hold on a second, like this isn't even like the Louisville fight song. I'm like, why is the Louisville song like not playing? And then like, and then I'm like, this is just some generalized, standardized like drum line. Like why, So that part of it feels a little failing. And again, I'm not, I spent some time, in my childhood in Louisville, Kentucky. So that's why, because I play teams, that I have some tether to in my life, but I'm not from Louisville, and I'm not an NCAA football fan. So, like, I don't know who the Louisville mascot is. I would hope that I would figure that out from playing college football 25, right? But I don't know who the mascot is. Maybe he's come out at some point. Maybe he hasn't. But that's another part of the pageantry that I feel like is missing. Like at least for Louisville, and Louisville's a ranked team. We started off the season 20th. We went up to like 18th. We've dropped out of the top 20 now, but they're not an unpopular team. There's no halftime show. And again, do you have to have a halftime show? No, but like some head nod towards it kind of again fills out like that part of that college nostalgia.
Right. Some type of college band. There needs to be, right. Yeah. There's definitely some pageantry that is bare bones here. It's not there, and not all mascots are there either, and not all fight songs, as you mentioned, are there.
So that's another part of the pageantry that's missing, and it might go unnoticed if it weren't for some of the lack of polish. And so, first of all, I'm again not a college football fan. I did not realize that Division 1A and 1AA schools had been renamed to like FCS and FSB. I think are the two names, or football championship something, whatever. So first of all, I didn't know what those were. So this team that I'm playing here, the Pandas, which so they use these terms to replace the Division 1A and 1AA schools, because the licensing agreement I think only goes for the Division 1 schools. So those other schools, those schools that are typically like your unranked things that really for some colleges will be the bulk of your schedule. So I'm like, hold on a second. So like a good chunk of my schedule is just going to be kind of these no-name white label brand like generic food schools. But then the two problems are, okay, so I understand you need to make up schools, but really you're like the school's mascot is going to be the Fighting Pandas? Like that's one thing. But then the thing that really struck out to me is I'm playing this game, and one of the newscaster announcements comes across, because they're frequently cutting back to the studio, and the guy is updating them on like other games that are going on, and like a prominent top 20 ranked school, I think also in the ACC, so I was like paying attention to it, is playing the exact same named school as the one that I'm playing. So I'm like,
wow, haven't noticed that.
Yeah, so
early in this is pre-conference football then, right? It's the first couple of games.
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, it's just, that type of stuff, kind of feels like it takes away from it. Things that I think can be tweaked and tuned.
Can we stay on that for just a minute?
Yeah, absolutely.
I have seen that you can go in, and one of the tips is changing your schedule. You can change your team schedule, so so that you can, and this is true to college football, right? You can kind of, you're trying to figure out who you're going to play in the preseason stuff or in the pre-conference stuff, because you want some warm-up games, but you also don't want complete cakewalk games, or you don't want complete challenges, or so you have the ability to kind of go in and tweak that schedule so that you can play to the strength of schedule. But some of that is kind of obfuscated into menus that don't necessarily explain themselves very well.
Yeah. One thing I will mention that is a point of praise in this is, as you just saw, I just had a successful kickoff return for a score. I feel like the running game in this is really good. Like in fact, I can't remember a Madden game, that like the running game felt this good. Passing game, but I will at least say on the passing game, I don't feel like there's a lot of like magnet passes that come on, or like passes that are going like way like just off into a completely different section of the field, and then like magically like the receiver catches up, or the defender knocks it down. Everything seems to play pretty reasonably accurately as far as the airspace goes.
I haven't noticed in the gameplay here, but are you playing the default passing scheme where you've got a button, but then you kind of hold it down to determine its strength of pass?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and so that's winds up largely being a lot of it winds up being driven by talent of the player. So that's the way I play most sports games in order to try and get like a realistic season. Like I just play the computer. I'm not going online, so I'm not trying to play a season where like I win every single game. So I think the other thing that bothers me a little bit, and again, this is a thing that I think can be tweaked, is these players are really injury prone. I mean, there seems to be an injury like every third play, and they go back and forth from being completely like I got a splinter to like seeming like it should be an impactful injury, but the impact statement is like player will return shortly. So
well, and this is where the wear and tear system is one of the new features. Like this feature is not in Madden. I mean, in Madden 24 had lots of injuries, especially in the line on both offense and defense. But this kind of wear and tear system where you are wearing down different body parts, or even the wear and tear system it plays a factor in your practice during the week, in terms of how you're spending your time, because you may come into a game with a sore arm or sore legs, or not necessarily a complete injury, but fatigued in certain ways. And so you can change the kind of percentage of fatigue in terms of the substitutions, so that you can be swapping people out more, so that you can try to eliminate some of that. But yes, it does seem like it does play a significant factor. And in some ways there's some realistic there, but it's also seems a little high in the terms of its percentage as well. I would agree.
Yeah, and I figure that's a thing that I can go in and tune, but I just haven't had time to to muck with it yet. So yeah, I mean, overall, I feel like there's just some things that make it lacking. That like I mean, the meta score for this game is like 88, which I just feel like is very high. I mean, I feel like overall, it's probably a little more polished. It's I mean, it's not an annualized release yet. We believe it will be, so you're kind of looking at it with that lens. And it feels, and yes, even though it didn't have a preceding instance of the game, it feels overall like it's more polished than you would think, an annualized series would be. I mean, I feel like I'm not seeing like the types of bugs that I might normally see, in a Madden game.
Ocean, right? Like how many years have I got on and talked about the types of bugs in a Madden game, right? Before the first patch, and they did have a significant patch come out during the first week, and they announced that there's more work to be done in the Dynasty mode in terms of some of the sim aspects and some other pieces there. So hopefully, hopefully that it does continue to increase in terms of its kind of realistic aspects.
Yeah. So I think the last three things that I have to say are number one, I feel like there should be more analytics in the responses from the sportscasters. Like I feel like, and I don't want to attribute too much to AI, but I feel like EA should have been doing this long enough now that the programming should be smart enough that when the sportscasters mention something, they'll say things about like the defense, but I'm like, but it should be nuanced enough at this point to say, there are a couple instances where they'll say something like, like my most recent game against Jack State, they did mention that like, hey, here's this like star caliber runner who, was predicted to gain all these yards, today, but this defense really stiffened and held the running game, so I feel like there should be kind of more of that. Things of the specifics. I'm like, you're showing the stats, you're clearly tracking the stuff. The application should be smart enough to tell there's something significant going on, in a particular area of the game, sufficient to for the announcers to have recorded lines like around that. So that's one. I think another problem with the UI is, as I mentioned, the stickiness of the play calling screens. I don't want to let that skate by as if there's a feeling like that's not impactful. The problem with that is that I personally don't get through the plays fast enough, and so motion, once you're up to the line of scrimmage, like motion seems to take like incredibly long, and like literally if you don't get up to the line of scrimmage with like 15 seconds left on the play clock, like you're going to run out of time. So I had a couple instances where I got called for delay a game just because like by the time I got through the menu and got to the line, and then I didn't realize the play I had called had motion, and then I'm like, oh, because motion takes like 8 seconds. And then the last thing I'll mention, and you could see it on the screen maybe as it's come through a couple times, the pixel width of the route lines for people running passing routes. It may have been because I was playing at 1080p and I was doing game capture at the time, but they're not very fine. Like they're kind of thick lines, and I mean I am picking nits at like the pixel length, but it's such that when you're looking at the play, and then when I hit R2 and I pull back and I see the play routes on the thing, like it's hard for me to tell the guys in the backfield like who's running what route. So and sometimes when those icons are really close, like when you have the X receiver and the R1 receiver like right next to each other, or like when they're three stacked on the right hand side that are going to run a route, like that gets a little impactful, and limits my choices sometimes in like who I'm going to pick to pass to, because I'm like looking at it, and I'm like, I'm not going to take the risk that like I'm misreading what route a person's running, and I'm going to throw it to like a different guy. So I think
that's interesting. Like they do seem a little thicker than Madden in terms of their routes, and I've noticed that sometimes like when you have a crossing route, the arrows, the lines definitely kind of bleed in together. But I've been able to, and mainly this is like muscle memory from the last 5 years of Madden, is pull up that, kind of have a sense of where somebody's going based on what I've called. But if you're trying to learn the plays, I can see where that becomes more challenging.
Or in my case, where you're trying to learn the players, right? When like you don't know that Jamari Crooks or whatever I think his name is one of my star receivers, and you don't get understand like exactly where that guy lines up all the time, right? So you're really looking for him on the field and trying to understand. And I mean, it's a limitation on my part. The way I've played Madden, in these games for years, is when I snap the ball, it's going to sound horrible. When I snap the ball, I've already decided who I'm going to pass to. I mean, particularly if a player's running like a button hook, like, or a hook in, like he stops and turns, and you got to snap the ball. You got to get the ball to him so quick. Like there's no time for me to go through reads. Like I've made that decision before I snap. So that's where it gets impactful when like
Sure.
maybe I can't necessarily tell absolutely where everybody is.
Well, and
So
I think, I mean, the one thing that this does well is it does feel like I'm able to read the defense well, right? Like in a button hook, I can tell if somebody's up on somebody tight or if it feels like there's zone coverage so that there is some gap there for a pass, right? Like that part does seem to make a difference. But yeah, it does, I think you're right. And it feels fast too. I think one of the things that I've playing lots of seasons of Madden, that the movement coming off the ball, the rush coming in feels really quick. And maybe that's because I'm at this point playing kind of moderate skill teams, right? I think I'm playing things at like a 2 and 3 star level. So my line is not super great, which means that they're going to bleed in defenders pretty quickly, but I don't have nearly as much time in the pocket as I do in a Madden game.
yeah, are you playing on varsity or higher?
Varsity, yes.
Okay, so yeah, that definitely is the case when you scale difficulty. So the first game I played on easy because I'm learning the controls are in the game. I haven't been back to Madden forever, and like it there's a and it's got the age old problem, right? Where easy you blow like I'm doing here, you blow the team out by like 55 something points, and then all of a sudden you flip to varsity, which is only one skill level different, and like it's like a completely different game. So I'm probably at the point now where I'm gonna have to get in and dig around with sliders, right, to get the game balanced out. What would be nice? It would be really nice if like I guess I'm kind of surprised after like the decades that this game has been around. It'd be really nice if EA would get around to what Sony San Diego has, right, with dynamic sliders. And I guess at this point too, even with Sony San Diego, I guess I feel like there should be I would wish that there would be profiles, right, where I could go into a game and I could say I want a game that comes out statistically realistic, right?
Sure, right. So
like
presets.
yeah, and then it would dynamically scale to that. Because even with MLB, it's damping and floating to try and get to your skill level. But I'm like, no, just get me to a point where I get a reasonably winning percentage or whatever for the team that I'm playing. So
Yeah, I mean, Madden's definitely been that way where you have to adjust sliders to some degree. And that's places where the boards on Reddit or the forum on Operation Sports, there are places out there to go and get some sliders depending on what you're trying to accomplish. But you're right. Like compared to Sony San Diego and the dynamic setting of MLB The Show, that really is a blessing there.
yeah, and you bring up a good point, DBQ. There's resources out there, and I'm probably at the point now where I should just go get those. I mean, just like I don't monkey around trying to figure out like my wheel and pedals calibration, right, for F1 to dirt to WRC. Like, yeah, I go and have somebody do that for me. So I will definitely check that out. But that all being said, look, there are some. My whole point is there are some things that put some aerodynamic drag on this that keep it from being like I said, the Return of the King, right? Just an overwhelmingly like bonga experience that I'm like, okay, it's Friday, it's the weekend. I want to get down and like knock 8 games out right this weekend. It hasn't encouraged me to like sit on it, to that degree, but I am having fun with the game, and so it'll be interesting to see how it progresses.
Yeah, I'm glad you're having fun with it. It definitely, I'm having a blast with it as well. It does feel like it is the first iteration of it, right? There are definitely some improvements, some polish aspects that you mentioned here, but I've been really pleased with it in terms of an initial launch piece and stability, and hopefully it has good, as we talked about last week, right? The 2.2 million sales of the $100 edition is a pretty good sign that it's going to have some legs and what a annualized aspect of it looks like. So, all right, let's move on to our next one here. Thanks, Innate and Warawana, for being here. Glad to have you. Drive safe, Innate. Glad to have you listening on the road. So I got into the Marvel's Rivals beta this past week, and my son and I have had a chance to play through a number of matches, try a lot of different characters. And if you've read anything about it, it is pretty much accurate that it is Marvel skinned Overwatch. And that's gonna, either potentially turn you off if you've been burned out or never really, clicked with Overwatch itself. But also it could also completely overcome the kind of Overwatch hero shooter fatigue if you're a Marvel's fan. That it is effective in, the gameplay feels really smooth. It does, the modes at this point right now are pretty much a point capture and move the payload aspect, which are very similar in Overwatch as well. You've got a variety of characters. You've got kind of your melee tanky characters, you've got kind of DPS damage dealers, and then you've got support characters. Sometimes those support characters are doing buffs or heals. Adam Warlock can do resurrection, but you've got a couple of different options there. You have the ability to change your hero during a match, and I think that there's that piece. The one kind of layer that it adds on top of it is the team up layer, that you have the ability, depending on which characters you are, that they can provide some additional kind of boost to gameplay, where teaming up with Magneto and Scarlet Witch will give Magneto a big old magnetic sword. If you've got multiple, today I was playing and I was Star-Lord and Adam Warlock and Groot were on my team, which gave us kind of a 3-person team up, because we're all in kind of the galaxy, Guardians of the Galaxy type of universe there. So there's some kind of nuance pieces there. It's fast, it's pretty fluid. I have struggled with some melee characters in terms of getting hitboxes and getting contact. But I think that's also because I'm learning some of those characters. I've also been schooled pretty nicely by some melee characters. So some people have figured it out. But you've got, Star-Lord he's got his 2 guns, and if you do a dash, his guns reload. Rocket's a support character where he's got a gun, but then his right trigger also shoots out little bubbles of health. So you've got some different pieces there. The Punisher is very much a straightforward, kind of soldier 76 type of character. I think one of the challenges I've had, and this is not being in a coordinated team, is that as a melee character, I've found it hard to close the gap on distance characters, on range characters, because they can kind of pick me off as I'm even trying to get close to them. But you also have, your range characters have a significant fewer hit points than your melee characters do. So it feels pretty balanced, although, I've seen some things online in terms of some of the characters feeling a little overpowered, which is why you do a beta. This weekend, they released 2 other characters, Thor and Jeff, the little shark guy. Thor is a melee character, but then has kind of a limited number of throwing his hammer, throwing Molor. And then Jeff almost plays kind of like a Mercy to some degree, where he's got a water, he'll shoot water out, which will actively heal somebody as like a jet, and then has a short little water gun type of projectile. So there's definitely some differentiation, but it also is very much in that kind of Overwatch vein.
So the one question, to me, the only question that matters is, do Colossus and Wolverine have a cannonball special?
I don't think either one of them are in here yet. So
unacceptable.
Yep, I think there's not a lot, right? I mean, this is going to be this is a NetEase game. It's going to be free to play. That there's going to be characters coming out. There's not any Fantastic Four, so you don't have any, thing clobber in time yet. But yes, there is no. I mean, there are a few X-Men in here if you count Scarlet Witch or Magneto. Magic is in here. Colossus's sister, right, with the portals, are here. But in terms of some of those, I feel like Wolverine makes complete sense as somebody who they're going to attach to a battle pass that you're going to have to purchase, correct? Right? Like it's not going to be a free character. And I think that's the difficulty of playing the beta and really evaluating it is you get a sense of what the gameplay is, but you don't get a sense of what the store is going to look like in terms of, right now, you've got characters that have a couple different ranges of prices, but for the beta, everybody's unlocked. And so if it does the similar thing of many other free to play shooters where it's going to have a rotating free set of heroes, but then everybody else is going to have to be purchased or earned as you go through, which wouldn't surprise me at all as a free to play game.
Is Spider-Man in the game?
Yep, Spider-Man and Venom, and also another Parker, not May Parker because it's not Spider-Man's daughter, but the one
Penny Parker or something.
Yes,
like that.
Penny Parker, the one in the mech suit. Yep, is there as well.
Captain America?
I do not believe so. Iron Man is there. Does make me want to kind of look up who's all here. But yeah, I don't think that Captain America is there.
So how does Spider-Man and in general, you mentioned Thor, and I think Iron Man would fall in this category too. So when I think about the characters that would be hard to balance, like given the limitations that you mentioned, right, between melee characters and shooters, and this is where I had kind of misgivings about this game in the first place, because it was first advertised as a hero shooter with Marvel characters, and I'm like, okay, but the problem with that is like certain Marvel characters are just not, they don't fit into a shooter. Like there's no way you fit Hulk right into a shooter style. Now then I heard things like, oh well, but then he can throw rocks, and I'm like, okay, well that's a contrivance, right, to make it fit a game design that walks away from the way something like a Marvel Heroes, like online Morpig would play.
Sure.
So
yep.
Specifically, I'm curious about guys like given the limitations that you mentioned, right? Well, we balance shooters by giving them lower hit points. So, but then you have a Spider-Man or an Iron Man, and I'm like, and again, this is a me problem, right? Where I have problems suspending disbelief.
Yes, you kind of have to suspend disbelief because as Star-Lord, I was able to take out the Hulk multiple times, right? Like, and part of this is the Hulk is Bruce Banner. You start off, the Hulk is your ultimate. So you start off as Bruce Banner, you have a weapon, but you also start off with a full ultimate charge. And so you can become the Hulk relatively quickly. Your ultimate, spawns up pretty quickly. So you can do that, but it's also able to kind of chip away. And once you knock down the Hulk, you spawn back as Bruce Banner. I mean, there's some parallels with Hulk, with an Overwatch character, kind of like Diva, who's got the mech, and then who can get out of the mech and, has a limited range in terms of a pistol as well. But yes, you definitely need to suspend some disbelief. Spider-Man, the balance there is that he moves pretty quickly around the map. He's got a lot of fluidity in his movement, both vertical and horizontal, where, Venom is a melee character, but has a little bit of a spider swing, a web swing, but also is more limited than Spider-Man's. So it is balanced for a shooter more than it is an accurate reflection of character power in universe.
So kind of back to the balance thing, like those, what I think of as like the Ranger kind of characters, are they OP? I mean, is that going to be the risk? And when they're not OP, do they feel like they have been kind of artificially nerfed in order to keep them from being OP?
I guess I've seen some discourse online where the Punisher definitely has, seems to have a high win percentage, but I think that's also because the Punisher plays very similarly to so many other shooters, right? Like, that kit, you understand kind of the, having a machine gun and how that works, where Venom has got a higher range percentage because he's pretty tanky. And while he's melee, he's got a little more distance in his, his tentacles flail out to hit people, where Thor, his melee is up close. But I think what it does, like one of Thor's specials is kind of the, Destiny kind of shield bubble, right? That you can kind of drop a shield bubble as well. And so, that does some things where they try to balance out. I died a lot from many different characters. So I would not say that it feels like any one character is super overpowered at this time, but I know that looking through some of the discourse, there's certainly some questions out there in terms of some of the win percentages and balance.
So this is always the catch-22 with this type of game, or this type of property even. You're playing the game because you're a fan of the comic book characters. This is kind of a little bit of what I went through with Civil War, right? My problem always with Civil War is, first of all, the fact that it was called Civil War, but also the fact that it wasn't Civil War. And so to get me into the turnstile, they had to, they didn't do Civil War because of scope and scale, but they had to do something that gave me enough of a hook, still seated in the comic book lore, right, to make it significant, right? You can't do what is the equivalent of an event in a movie and still not come away with it feeling like it was an event, right? And that's why Civil War, even though it's arguably in the Captain America line of movies, is really an Avengers movie. And so they kind of masterfully did that. With Marvel's heroes, and this is one of the reasons why I'm staying out of the pool, is like I don't feel like as a comic book fan I'm going to be able to go into it and do that suspension of disbelief, and like it's like the whole reason, right, that you go with that IP is because you're trying to pull those people in. So like how are they walking and so they have to walk a very fine line. Are they walking that line with you right now, or does it feel like it's a line they're walking now, but eventually they're going to have to fall off of it, or like how is that?
I will say that for me, and Nate's comment here in terms of just continuing to play single player games, I found the more I played it, the more I thought, oh, I could go back and play Marvel's Avengers. Right? Like I enjoy playing these characters, but I would enjoy playing these characters in a setting that isn't competitive PvP type of shooter, right? Like
or even one of the Ultimate Alliance games.
Sure, right? I mean, the Ultimate Alliance games can be really fun in terms of kind of just the turn your brain off and enjoy kind of the button mashiness, the Diablo-esque of Marvel characters. I think that I say this as somebody who enjoyed Overwatch for the first year, came back to it a couple times, 2017, 2018, 2019. I would play some of the seasonal events, but never got into the competitive scene of Overwatch. I usually would play a support character unless I was doing some of the co-op missions, right? Like the Halloween mission in Junkertown, or the different types of special events that they would have. I would come back for because I enjoyed playing those characters, not necessarily the core gameplay, right? One of the reasons why I was willing to throw $15 at the 3 PvE stories that came out this past fall of the PvE campaign aspects of which are basically Destiny Strikes, because I enjoy those characters in Overwatch, but I'm not an Overwatch competitive fan. I enjoy watching it, but I know that I quickly get outpaced in terms of skill. So if people have enjoyed that type of gameplay, this does that well. And it may feel fresh enough because of the variety of Marvel characters that it pulls some people who are kind of tired of where Overwatch is at this point, or maybe pull some of those people that enjoyed early Overwatch back because of the characters. But if you are simply just playing for the characters, there are better options out there in terms of playing.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this goes. I know there's, again, we go back to, I can't remember I think we discussed Concord maybe a little bit either last week or the week before. And there's a lot of belief that it's Marvel Rivals that's going to suck a lot of the air out of the room that Concord would be trading on. And I just don't buy that. Like, I think we'll see how it goes. First of all, it's a NetEase game. And I'm sorry, I just don't anticipate any NetEase game is going to become anything other than a loot box palooza, predatory, gotcha game, eventually at some point, if it's not like that right out of the gate. But I just, like, it's hard. Look, even the MCU can't keep the MCU going. Like, I mean, it's been a fall off. And look, I love Robert Downey Jr., but Robert Downey Jr. being Doctor Doom, like, I just feel like this is the Arrowverse doing Flashpoint right out of the gate, the first season of The Flash. And I'm like, okay, so like you guys pulled that trigger and now you're doomed to do nothing but time travel for the remainder of the seasons. That's exactly what happened to The Flash. So, and now we're just at that state where like everything is a multiverse thing and a variant, and while everything's a what if and what do they call it in the DC world?
In
Elseworld, like and I'm like, you like, to a certain, like, the lovely thing about the Infinity, I know I'm riffing on a tangent, but it's very analogous. Like, the lovely thing about the Infinity Saga was like a thing was a thing. Like, the Avengers were the Avengers. Like, you were clear what the stakes were. And when Civil War happened, that's why there were consequences. That's why it meant something. Now you're in a world where like you put heroes up against heroes, and I almost guarantee what's going to happen is you're gonna have heroes fighting multiverses heroes, and you're gonna feel like it doesn't mean anything. Secret Wars. They're gonna do Secret Wars. I don't know which variant of Secret Wars meant a thing, because when you did the original Secret Wars back in the 80s, like, that meant there were heroes who didn't come back.
Right. And I'm assuming that this is the Secret Wars from the teens, right? With Doom as the heavy and kind of the collapsing of universes. But yeah, I wondered if we'd get into Robert Downey Jr. as Dr. Doom. And yes, we did, only at 48 minutes into the podcast, ladies and gentlemen. But I think it is, you're not coming to this game because of a narrative. Like, there's a little bit of a setup, right? But it is, at least in the beta, there's not any real heavy narrative that's out there. They certainly have the capacity to. They are kind of trading in this multiverse aspect, so they could create, this is a female Galactus who's kind of the one orchestrating all of this. So there's definitely some narrative that they could lean into. But it'll be interesting to see. I think because it's a NetEase, because it's a Marvel property, it's probably going to have legs. There are Marvel and DC properties that have stretched out for quite a long time. The fact that DC Online is still up and running, right, after 12 years or however many, like, that is significant. The potential here, the gameplay is actually pretty good. What I'll be interested in is in a year from now and 2 years from now, if it is still functioning, do they start adding in other types of modes? Do they start using the characters? They've got the physics for all these characters. Do they start doing different things with them? Which is certainly possible. But I think right now it's hard to see what that is, because there hasn't really been much in terms of, other than what we've seen in the beta, there hasn't been too much out there around what the kind of long tail of this might look like.
Do you think they will hook this into the MCU? Like, is Captain America not in the game now because when they put Captain America in the game, they're going to put in Sam Wilson initially? There's no Fantastic Four in the game because they're going to put him in the game when the movie comes out.
I mean, that wouldn't surprise me at all, right? Like, I mean, these characters are not MCU lookalike characters. They have their own kind of art design, and the art design is actually pretty nice. It's a cell shaded. There we go. Got it there. But it makes complete sense that you would do a battle pass around Falcon and Captain America during the month that Captain America is coming out. That, just like Marvel Snap's battle pass this month is Deadpool and Wolverine, which makes complete sense because this is the Deadpool month. So they've got that capacity to kind of leverage the release calendar to target some of those things. So there's the potential to go really deep, but it'll be interesting to see what the kind of support and release schedule of those characters ends up looking like. And the other piece of that is that's fun if you like those characters, but then 50 characters in, how complicated do the menus get? How complicated does the learning different play styles and everything else become?
Are there any restrictions? Can one team have 6 Spider-Men?
You cannot have duplicate characters. So once it's selected, there's not a restriction in terms of you need a character from each class or any type of those things, but you cannot have duplicate characters.
Okay. My last thing about the MCU is, look, now that you guys are bringing the X-Men into the MCU, you guys have been, when it was just Fox, you guys have been just negligent in your care of Colossus as a character. He's about to become prime time now. He's been nothing but a second-rate, C-tier character in these movies. Please clean him up and do him some justice.
As somebody who has just watched Deadpool 1 and 2 over the past week, I can appreciate the tongue-in-cheekness of what Colossus has been.
And quite honestly, that's been the best rendition of Colossus, in my opinion,
sure.
the one in the Deadpool movies.
I mean, otherwise you get a teenage Colossus in X2 back in the mid 2000s, right? There hasn't been a whole lot there. So, all right, let's move off of our 2 big games here and move into some main news stories. We're going to keep things moving. This first one is relatively quick because it's a follow-up from a news story that Towmaster had 2 weeks ago around some of the Battle Pass changes that Respawn was doing for Apex Legends, or Apex, am I getting it right? Yeah. That the Battle Pass, as Tao talked about 2 weeks ago, was that it was splitting up into 2 parts and that you were no longer going to be able to use in-game currency to purchase that Battle Pass. They've reversed this over the course of the week. I'm looking at a news story here from GameIndustry.biz from Vicky Blake, but there are plenty of other news stories around it. The big piece here from Respawn's statement is they'll continue to split the Battle Pass into 2, which is not a new feature in free-to-play games, but that the first section of the Battle Pass, you will be able to unlock the premium by completing a series of in-game challenges. They even say, quote, simple in-game challenges. And then for the second split, the second half of the Battle Pass, it will be purchasable with in-game currency. So they kept the split, but they are kind of walking back the needing real-world money in order to purchase a Battle Pass or to have the premium edition of the Battle Pass, which I think is consumer-friendly at this point. All right, let's move on to the next one. GameLogic, as we were talking about voice overs and announcing in EA Sports Football, it definitely is not using AI and whether or not it could benefit from that, as you talked about. But there have been plenty of conversations around voice actors and AI concerns, and this has led to your next news story.
Yeah, so this story over on Push Square, video game performers to strike due to AI concerns. Members of the USA Actors Union SAG-AFTRA have confirmed they'll be going on strike from tomorrow, 26 July 2024, over concerns relating to AI usage in the industry. Video game performers, such as voice actors, have been in talks with some of the biggest game publishers, including Activision, EA, Take-Two, and more, over a new type of interactive media agreement to protect their work and rights, but have failed to reach a positive conclusion. As a result, members will go on strike from tomorrow. So we had similar action take place with the writers and actor strikes that went on in Hollywood. If you didn't follow that news story, a lot of the problem was that a lot of actors were being would get hired and would be called in, and then would get on set and would find out they were being 3D modeled. They were asked to go into a trailer and do a lot of their actions that they would be doing on set, but to do them like repetitively while they were being mocapped. A lot of these things were not in their upfront agreements, and they were not informed before they would come on set. They were being asked to sign into agreements that gave people rights to their likenesses and their usage and their voice, in perpetuity. So, there was a big snapback because of that. Similar concerns here. Friend of the show, Ramon Terrell, is a voice actor, has done video game work. He was just featured in Homeworld 3. And has been talking about this as he's run into a lot of the same problems, and the fear and concern is with these even isn't even that like the actors will be mocap, but like they'll just be ignored. Like you don't like voices can be synthesized. Like you don't need to hire human. You would have to hire human beings for performances. So I think there's a lot more at stake in the details of these things that need to be worked out. Supposedly there are like 25 articles in the agreement that's being negotiated right now. And supposedly, now this comes from the corporate side. The corporate side is claiming that they've come to agreement on 24 out of those 25. So, we'll just see how that goes. What I can't tell right now is what is the impact? Like for Hollywood, that put a chilling effect on like almost everything. And we just didn't get new stuff for, 18 to 24 months. I mean, big series that were all, Stranger Things, had the brakes put on it. Lots of stories, lots of TV shows that are very popular and very huge. Just had like large gaps in their continuity. While this was going on. But as for instance, this news story also on Push Square, GTA 6 not affected by current union strike over AI issues. Next year's Grand Theft Auto 6 won't be impacted by the decision to call a SAG-AFTRA union strike effective today over concerns surrounding AI replacing video game performances like voice actors. Confirming to Kotaku, a spokesperson for the publishers included in negotiations said GTA 6 is exempt from the strike. Then on the official SAG-AFTRA page, it stated union members can work on the game and will not be disciplined for doing so. So this is another thing that we're going to see, and I don't want to cast any disparaging aspersions on like the union and what they're doing, but one of the things that went on with the Hollywood strike is lots of people asked for exemptions. Like Tom Cruise was bothered that like he couldn't promote his Mission Impossible, while the strike hadn't concluded, and lots of people, particularly as it got closer to getting negotiated, were like, "Hey, we've almost got this thing done. Can't we just go back?" And the union stood firm and said, "No, absolutely not. Like no, you guys are not to break the picket line." What I worry as we observe is that there will be instances where like GTA 6's agreement, I don't really know how much that's based on like GTA 6 is doing something in its work scope that makes it exempt, or was GTA 6 just given an exemption because it is Jupiter, right, in the solar system, and like no one's gonna dork with the trajectory of GTA 6, and they wield that much power. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes, because what it means is that while GTA 6, like I said, is the 800-pound gorilla, what I don't know is that other big AAA titles like a Call of Duty or something won't be able to come through and pull as much weight and get an exemption made. So we'll just have to see how it goes.
Yeah, no, I think it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I am personally glad they're doing it. I think the AI voice work and the automation of that, the simplicity of some of those tools of taking just parts of somebody's recording and being able to generate additional lines out of that really does raise questions in terms of voice actors and their ability to engage in this profession. And so glad they are, glad that this issue is being raised and that they're taking a stand on it. If it means that we don't get some things and they get delayed, I think the AI aspect in games is going to be just like it is in a lot of other industries, is going to be a really big talking point and point of contention whether it's in development or in, kind of the production aspect of it. It cannot not have an impact, but what that does to segments of this industry will have the potential to kind of drastically change that landscape. All right, let's move on to our next story. This one is coming from Variety, actually, that Warner Brothers Games acquires Player First Games, the developer of Multiverses. So Player First Games, Multiverses has been, this is the Multiverses that came out and sat on the shelf for redevelopment in a brand new engine in UE5 and relaunched this past spring. And, I think to me, what this shows is a significant investment from Warner Brothers in the continuation of Multiverses as a platform, that you're not going to pick up the studio if you don't think that you've seen the level of player engagement over the first 3 months, or the level of player retention over the past 3 months. I think that it shows that they see, and goes back to WB's comments publicly in terms of wanting to have more live service games, that they are putting their money where they say they're going to be investing is into this developer. Granted, WB Games has had plenty of other suspect actions along with WB as a general corporate property, but I think, at least for people and fans of Multiverses or platform brawlers, that it shows that Multiverses is not going anywhere anytime soon.
I worry. I mean, WB has really turned a leaf to where they are firmly planting their foot in that same in the same soil that Activision and EA do. Right now, today, we just don't know what's going to happen with Rocksteady. Yeah, I worry. I mean, by the upside, even though they don't do video games, I mean, because WBIE is a subsidiary of WB, the entertainment wing of Warner. I guess movie and video games are all in one division. So at least they're not Paramount. Paramount's doing some even shadier stuff. But I mean, again, Warner Brothers has done a lot of shady stuff with killing movies that are actually already done with production and just choosing not to release them so that they can write them down as tax write-offs. Man, yeah. My highest hopes, that studio does okay.
Yeah, no, I think there's, I'm sure that there were plenty of those conversations leading into this as well, of what's the future hold if we're attached to WB as a publisher. This at least gives hopefully a little stability, but you're also right. Plenty of other production companies and teams that have put finished products together to have them canned and shelved, would beg to differ with how quickly WB can turn on a dime. So, all right, let's move off to one final news story here. This is a GameIndustry.biz. This was covered in multiple places, but this article again is coming from Vicky Blake. This is that Humble Games is shutting down, restructuring, laying off a number of people. A couple conflicting statements here that, according to the article and a couple of other articles that I've read and posts on X, that the studios that are under Humble Games, so Humble Games, is owned by Ziff Davis. Ziff Davis purchased Humble probably at this point 6 years ago. So they have the Humble Game Store, the Humble Bundle offerings, but also Humble has been a game producer for a number of years now. That many of the development teams in that banner have had some significant layoffs post this. That the game industry article talks about that they are looking at the company. Humble Games says that they are not shutting down, but that operations are moving to a third-party consultancy, the Powell Group, to handle their remaining games. So this could very well be, similar to what we saw with Take-Two and the, what was that? Team 17, the Ali World people, or the game studio of Kerbal Space Force, in terms of they may still own the name of that company and are not officially shuttering it, but that does not mean that the people who are working at that company are still there. So, those studios still are, it sounds like games that are in the pipeline are still moving forward, but it also feels like that they are Humble Games, and Ziff Davis itself is kind of divesting from its publishing arm and farming that out for what is left as it thins out its staff.
So let's get personal. Go ahead and take off our defensive screens. Turn the lights down low. Trying to see if I can actually turn my lights down low. So,
you're setting the mood here.
So DBQ, you are a staunch consumer of the Humble Bundle. How is this hitting you?
I have been over the years a Humble consumer, both humble in terms of my pride level, but also in terms of the publisher. I've really enjoyed the games that Humble Games have produced. They have come out with a lot of kind of indie pixel stuff. They've been fun. There's been a number of things that have found their way onto Game Pass. Being a subscriber to Humble Bundle, you get access to like whatever Humble's game library is, which I've never actually gone in and done. But there are definitely games in there that I have really enjoyed, and they've seemed to green light some things that are pretty creative. So I think it is, as we've talked about so many other times on here, like it is not a surprise given the industry and the number of layoffs that are here and continue to exist. But it is disappointing because the potential for these games to find alternative paths now become more and more challenging. Like if I look through the games that are here, there's still a couple of them that are coming out still, but Arkvale, Hat in Time, Fey Tactics was something that Swiss talked about. Iconfall is kind of a Paper Mario like RPG. One Step from Eden is another game that Swiss talked about. Slay the Spire is in there. So, a number of different games unpacking kind of the indie hit. So there's been some good things. Unsighted was a game that kind of an action role playing with a little bit of sci-fi aspect in it. A lot of games that I have enjoyed in their smaller bite-sized ones. And the challenge going forward, thinking about the industry, is that where else do these get picked up? How many of these would have not happened without Humble Games, and with the landscape and investments as it is now, how many of these would not happen in the current marketplace? So I think that the flip side of the voice actor strike, right? These are smaller games that do not use any type of voice acting, or maybe very minimal voice acting, but they're not motion captured. There's not a lot there. But the industry is having challenges both in the high end in terms of AI pieces, and also in the low end in terms of some of the indie space. So, and Nate here in the comments says, wasn't really sure what was going on with the Humble situation development side. Yeah, I don't think it affects the Humble Bundle piece because the Humble Store is sticking around. This is very much in terms of its of its role as a game producer. The number of other smaller studios that it was publishing games for, game publisher, I should say, rather than producer. But so that's where it really seems to hit, is all the studios that were publishing games under the Humble Games banner. Any other thoughts here? We're ready to turn the corner into the final segment.
Let's go ahead and move into part 3.
All right. So the final segment here, as always, on Enough to Keep Going, we're wrapping up what else we have been playing over the course of this week. And for me, that has been finally getting a chance to play a little bit with the new PDP Riffmaster guitar. So Riffmaster guitar came out this spring or this summer. It was released. The pre-orders went up and sold out pretty relatively quickly. There's been more consistent restocks. The PlayStation 5 and Xbox. The Xbox version also works with PC. It works for both Rock Band 4 and also Fortnite Festival. So the neck of itself has 2 sets of frets. So you've got one up close and you've got one kind of at the traditional guitar space. It has a very guitar or Rock Band feeling strum button, where like Guitar Hero would historically have kind of the click, and this has kind of the mushiness of Rock Band. It's very accurate. I played it. My family and I played it with Rock Band 4. Picked up Rock Band 4 months ago when it was on sale. Rock Band 4 Rivals for like $10, in anticipation that I knew I wanted to pick this up at some point in time when it came in stock. This weekend, I've also had a chance to play Fortnite Festival with it. Works really well in Fortnite Festival. It's got a little analog stick behind the neck that feels kind of like a Switch Joy-Con analog stick, but it allows you to kind of move your character and navigate both menus, but also in terms of, if you've played Fortnite Festival where you have to run around and select songs, it works for that as well. I'm sure somebody has already posted using it for some difficult challenge in Elden Ring, right? Like people will find other ways to apply this, but it works really well. Like it feels like I'm rocking, partying like it's 2008 again, right? Playing some Rock Band and enjoying it, working back through that. It connects pretty seamlessly. It's got a little wireless dongle that goes in a USB port on your console or PC, and then it connects pretty simply there in terms of syncing up. It, the Rock Band piece of it, because of the way Fortnite Festival works, that you are, doing inputs on a D-pad or buttons, that you're not strumming. At least I haven't figured out a setting to get the strumming down. You're simply just pushing the buttons as they come down the note line. But it's very responsive. It feels a lot easier. I don't know. It feels a lot more intuitive than doing the left, right, X and B button presses on Fortnite Festival if you're playing on a controller or a keyboard type of thing. So, I think if you have played with a plastic guitar at some point in your life, it feels like you are back to that point in your life playing with a plastic guitar. And that, the enjoyment of that will vary for people, but it's also been something that I enjoyed it at the time. Haven't had a whole lot to come back to. Every once in a while, break out something. But there was definitely a time when I would be playing with friends and neighbors or my kids that had the guitar set up and a microphone and the drum kit, and really enjoyed the plastic instrument era. And this is a well put together. It's got a headphone jack in it as well. So it's a nice piece of kit that you can plug in the headphone and, not disturb the rest of the people in your room if you are playing on a TV in a shared space. So it's PDP did a nice job in terms of it. It breaks down, folds up nicely, so it's easy to store. Warawana over here talks about the Fortnite button, trying it. Yes, it does work really nicely with a guitar. So compared to, even if you get used to the button layout, it's still just not the same as feeling like you're playing a plastic instrument. So there's my recap of the hot game of 2015 in terms of when Rock Band 4 came out, right? For all the junk that I gave Towmaster when he goes back to the well for old games. So I'm going back 9 years ago here, 10 years ago here with Rock Band 4 to play some plastic guitar. GameLogIQ, you got 2 other games here. You want to hit these before we wrap up? Or do you have any questions on the plastic guitar front?
No, just a comment. I think we're just entering the point in the timeline where those of us who were participants in that generation are now starting to really realize and speak to the fact that, like, we've talked about some other things that are like peaks in gaming history. Xbox Live, Xbox 360 generation was kind of like a peak of online gaming. I think we're realizing now that, like, that whole era, that harmonics era of like that, like Rock Band parties were a thing, and I think we're just starting to realize that that was an era that was like peak in the industry that we are likely to never recapture again.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. So
I worked at a college campus, worked on multiple college campuses during the Guitar Hero, Rock Band eras, and those were, both dorms and also kind of programming events for campus. Was set up a couple different full sets and have let students play. So yeah, I think it really is something that is hard to capture in this state, right? Like, it is, we can certainly play online and have that same ability, but the kind of bringing everybody together for a shared experience that is both video game but also kind of physical manifestation. Watching high end Rock Band players play drums is pretty impressive, right? Like, I mean, it's impressive enough watching high end guitar, but playing a drum, you're still pretty much playing a drum. And so there's a lot there. And so it was a very specific moment, and it felt so concentrated at the time because it was an annualized release. It was really big, but it's also something that flamed out relatively quickly, right? We hit such a saturation point so fast that you could, it was, your GameSpots and your Goodwills, you had plastic instruments for dirt cheap. But now if you want those same plastic instruments, you're paying hundreds of dollars on eBay because they all have ended up in a landfill somewhere, and finding working ones in good condition has become a whole lot harder.
Yep. Yay, verily. So the first game on the last part of my rundown is Shin Megami Tensei 5. So I went back to that this week. And look, every time, I've got these games in rotation, Shin Megami Tensei 5, I keep wanting to say Itri and Odyssey, but it's Unicorn Overlord and Ayuden Chronicle.
Chronicles, yep.
I keep going back to those games, in each time, like the depth and the experience that I, uncover, like the next 2-hour increment that I go in, is just sublime, and it's just amazing. So here I am, in a big, huge boss battle. This is my third iteration going at it. And the first 2 times I lost, and quite honestly, just before I was going back to this third time, I was like, okay, I've clearly gotten into something that I wasn't supposed to get into. I'm just going to go all the way back to the beginning of this level and just grind. Because that's where I was, and that's how I've been trained. Diablo 4, Star Citizen, Destiny 2, like they teach you to grind, right, to get to these challenges. And this time, like the third time, I went back to a well, and I visited all of the different areas and kind of, thought through all of the things that I had learned as I went through these iterations. And, I changed up, I went and I did some demon fusions, and I changed up my active party alignment and put an additional demon in and moved my essences around, changed some abilities. This was also a fight that, I only was able to win because of all of the items that I had been hoarding. Like I wasn't able to win it solely based on my own character innate abilities. So just from a strategy
Kind of
aspect,
brute forcing it way with having enough to keep you healed and smash on.
well, and with attacks as well, because some of the item-based attacks, break through some of the monsters' defenses and things.
Yep.
So this is, as a person who's a huge strategy fan, like this was a sublime tactical experience because it forced me to go back and mix up the formula. Forced me to go back and kind of fight differently, just in kind of the order and the sequence of the attacks that I went through. So I mean, it was just a great experience, and quite honestly, it was like, as far as I can tell, it was kind of like one of the major battles breaking through into kind of the next phase or next arc or next act or whatever of this game, and and I did it. And I did it like you said, like not by button mashing, not by like Souls like frame by frame, super accurate combat precision, but by mastering the strategy. So it was a great experience. I don't think I can talk enough about this game. I mean, totally weird wackadoodle story for our Western culture, difficult to get our heads wrapped around. Seems very strange. Also, once I got past this battle, there's these elements in the game where as you complete certain segments, like characters, demons want to talk to you, or certain characters of the game want to talk to you, and so you have to go to an area, into another dimension, of rest or whatever, and have those conversations. But those also yield, can often yield significant kind of power ups. Or increases to your level or your capabilities, your characteristics, and so there was a little bit of that after this. So yeah, it was a good time. It was a really good time. Good meaty challenge. Again, kind of can't talk about it enough. So looking forward to playing through some more Shin Megami Tensei 5.
Nice. And you're going back to one of the big games from last year, or the biggest game from last year, in terms of Baldur's Gate 3.
So, and the story here is that my Baldur's Gate 3 campaign is not going according to what the popular campfire tales would lead you to believe. I've had 3 major characters which feature prominently in ad copy and various stories, tales that people tell of their experience of the game, that are dead. So one of the early female, I think she's a female orc or half orc, I wound up getting in a fight with her, and so Ray just wound up killing her. And then one of the other one of the major characters, Asterion, isn't even part of my party, because when I met him in the early goings of the game, I just we exchanged witty banter. And then I just kind of said, okay, yeah, let's just go our separate ways. And off he went, and I've never seen him again. So, and then I'm going to get a little spoilery, so I apologize for people who haven't played the game. You can put a pin here and then come back in a few minutes. But Karlach the Demon has been part of my party. We went and chased down the paladins that she'd asked us to go after, and I tried to be a peacekeeper and kind of say, hey, we don't really know who's who, maybe it was just a misunderstanding. And she basically said, well, if you're not with me, you're against me. And so a fight broke out. I tried to, jump back to her side and attack the paladins. But at that point, in the midst of combat, there was no going back. So she's, it was us or her, so, it's just me, Shadowbane, and Will. And I'm like, I think I'm going to have to, and I've encountered Halson, the druid who turns into a bear. And same thing, we talked with him and went back and forth. And I just said, look, I understand you're on this quest, but I got to go get this thing out of my head. That's a priority for me. We wish you the best. I went and did some side missions that I think were helpful to him, at least clearing out some of the resistance that he was anticipating encountering with the goblins. But he wasn't part of our party. So at this point now, I think I need to go back. I'm going to go back to the goblin camp and try and reconnect with him and get him into my party, because quite frankly, like as far as named characters go, like I don't know who's left, that I'm supposed to have through this adventure. I also went. I was about to cross over into like the next act, but like through the mountain passage, it told me it was like you're too underleveled. If you go on to this next part, you're gonna get walloped. So I banged my head against the wall fighting this party of goblins, who I would be very close to kind of pulling it off, but then they would always wind up getting me at the end. So I went in the other direction, did some other adventures. So that now after just talking about how Shin Megami Tensei, I was able to figure out how to get through that battle without grinding. I'm definitely in the mode on Baldur's Gate 3 where I feel like I'm gonna have to go do the grind. But it's super interesting, that for me in my experience, it's just radically different, from ones that I'm hearing other people are having. So
I think that's the beauty of kind of a narrative based game like this, is that there's so many, we can all have varied different experiences in terms of what that narrative becomes based on some of those choices that you make and the impact of those choices. Yep. All right. Game Logic, thanks for being here, Warwana, and Nate, thanks for joining us tonight in the chat. Hope you both have a good start to your week. Lots of games in front of you, or at least only a few games, but lots of time to play them, right? That is always the challenge for all of us who enjoy games as a hobby and a passion, is there's so much to play. Game Logic, as you look ahead to the next week here, what's on your playlist, things that you're making sure you make a little bit of time to play as well?
Yeah, so I'm planning on getting back and playing some more college football. Another interesting note is, I think, because we've wound up talking a lot tonight about the grind. Because the grind for the end of season 4 of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 was just what it was, and it's a bit of a time and place kind of thing. Work was really busy. I had to be I had 2 days worth of customer meetings. I had to be in very early because I had to absolutely be on time. So I had to go in early enough to avoid traffic. I was trying to get through the grind, and just like the last night, as they were wrapping up, I think I was at like 95%, and that's I forget how many. It's an hour. I think I had about 5 more hours of like gameplay to get to 100% on the battle pass, and I was like, I could do it, but I don't know that I just feel like going without sleep that much. And so
How very mature and adult of you to not oversleep for an important work meeting because you're trying to finish out a battle pass.
Yeah, well, by that time I'd actually finished. I mean, that was more so like why my time had been limited going up into the last day of the battle pass. So I had a little bit more left over than I might have otherwise had. But like when I got to the to that point, I was just kind of like, again, and I do this soul searching every few months, right, with games as a service, and I'm just like, what am I doing? How am I spending my time? Does this makes sense? And so I just got to the point where I think I'm going to put Call of Duty down for at least a season, maybe longer. And so I've been trying to intermix some things back into my playlist, because now I'm kind of getting back to wanting some of those things that we talked about when I was in grad school, where, okay, but I want a game that I can, like tonight, when we get off the podcast, I do want to get some gaming in, but it needs to be something that, like, not like Baldur's Gate 3, where I feel like there's no point in me playing that game unless I have 2 hours put aside. So I've been mixing in, first iteration, I've been mixing in some racing games. So I went and grabbed everything that I own in the Dirt series, Dirt 4. I pulled down Dirt 3 too, couldn't get that working, but Dirt 4, Dirt Rally, and Dirt Rally 2.0. So I'm going to be hitting some of that as well. And then also of note this week, Star Wars Bounty Hunter comes out, which is a
it's a remaster, maybe, or an
remaster make, I think I might call it.
PlayStation 2 Jango Fett game. Yep.
Yeah, so I might be checking that out later this week as well.
Nice. Another game that is coming out this week that I'm looking forward to is Thank Goodness You're Here, the kind of comedy game that I played the demo of back during the Steam Next Fest. But I'm sure I'll be playing some football. It also would not surprise me if a Marvel game gets into my mix after feeling the conversation we had tonight of do I want to invest more time in a beta, or do I want to go play a single player game and just enjoy the scope of these characters? So we'll see where that brings me to next week. But those of you listening, whether you've been listening tonight, thank you for joining us, or you're listening during the week or any other time that you pull us up. We're glad to have you here. We are always coming back to you here on Enough to Keep Going. We are inching our way toward episode 350 with only 2 more there before we get there, or 1 more before we get there. So, but we will be back next week. I believe it should be all 3 of us, Towmaster coming back, and GameLogIQ and myself, DPQ Hams, will be here to talk with you about what we've been playing, some of the big news of the week, and any other experiences and side conversations that tickle our fancy. So again, for myself, DPQ Hams and GameLogIQ, thanks for joining us. This has been Enough to Keep Going. And until next time, play the games you love those you play with, and be kind to yourself. Good night, everybody.